10, but where J.D. Hale's place is on the curve out there. Of course, they filled in a lot of that. And of course, in between the stumps and stuff, why you had to manage with that. Well, there was one time there that it got real bare, so Raymond Miller, his father, owned the Ford garage, Joseph Miller. And we got together and we got our sleds, tied them together, and made a great big barrel, and we hauled water. So we hoped it would freeze the night so we could slide down the next day. So you had to make a lot of your own playthings, you know, and your wagons. Discarded things, so we'd go to the city dump, which used to be out behind the cemetery. And we'd go out there, they might have been somebody's old baby carriage that had a couple wheels and the axle, and we'd take them apart, come home, and make us carts and wagon and scooters. We used to make those. We'd take a board, take one skate, take it apart, and nail it to the bottom of it, and put a T-handle up there, and boy, the way you went down the street. That was some of our things that we had. But I've got so many good memories of, and like you say, people walked. My dad worked every day up until the time when we took over the transfer company. But then he'd ride back with me at noon. We'd always walk in the morning. And we had a large dog. It's a cross between a St. Bernard and an Irish setter. And he was everybody's friend in town. And I'd always could tell when Dad was coming down the street, there the dog was about half a block ahead of him. And if you went to the show, old Duke went along with you to the show. And the Guerin brothers owned the Grand Theater, and Duke was no problem to him. They let him in there. Once in a while he'd get into church. And in school, when we were going to Catholic school, we had a frame school there. And he'd get up and lay under where the sisters had their desk up there on the raised platform. And he'd keep her feet warm with the dog, you know. And he was everybody's, like I say, everybody's pet. So I worked at a lot of different things and went to school too. I worked in the high-speed gas station that we had, all gas. Worked in there in the summertime, and worked at the sugar factory 1 year. The year I graduated, I worked out there 12 hours a day, 32 cents an hour. And when I got the job going, we had a standard procedure in our family that the first person that got the job had to pay at least $1 a day for their board and room. And that was a standing procedure. So when I went there, like our mother always packed me a big dinner bucket full of food that lasts all day, and did all the laundry and things like that. So that's what kept your family going. I often wondered that my dad with that job, which was supposed to be a pretty good job, but possibly paid maybe $140 or $50 a month. But there were 8 children. When they sat down, they were 10 to the table. You never heard any arguments. They ate what was on the table, and we never missed a meal. And I think I've got a real good memories of Paulding Village, and as I say, they provided our living for us, because whatever business you were in, the money had to come from the people. And so I'll pass it on now.
He didn't mention Roman Coal Company.
Yeah, we put that over after James Cadwallader sold out to us. And that's 1933. We took it over. They were selling coal. Cadwalladers were, when we took it over, $6.40 a ton delivered. Now, if you were there when the load of coal come in, and you went and loaded it yourself, they took 50 cents off for that. So. And then to look at it, what the price of it is today. At the time, Mr. Cadwallader sold about 30-some cars of coal a year, and when I had left the firm in 1941, they were up to 100 cars of coal. And then the John L. Lewis thing came along, and they busted the coal miners union, and the coal prices shot up and everything else. But there was a time when they would get a surplus of coal at the mine of what they call nut and slack. That would be the real fine. And our city water department and light department on Walnut and Caroline down there, they would buy coal from these places, but when they had this glut of a market like the oil is today, coal companies said, if you pay the freight, we'll load the cars and send it to you free of charge. Yeah. So that went on till they cleaned that mess up. See? And then a lot of these people that didn't have too much income at the time, and maybe got a little in the arrears on your light bill, why they would get down there and shovel this off, this coal, and they got 15 cents a ton for shoveling that coal off. And that went on their account.
When they talk about pollution today, but I was thinking of all the coal that's burned every home
Yeah.
and so forth. It seems there must have been as much pollution then as there is now.
Well, I know that the housewives were very unhappy about, especially with the trains. If you live close to the railroad, I know my mother and different ones, but they had to finally come out with an order to the railroad. You didn't ever fire up the engine while it was inside the village limits. So, because that was always on wash day, you can imagine what would happen. And that was, the washing in those days was a lot different than it is today. You didn't just throw it into the automatic. It was a rub and tub. Yeah.
Norm, weren't there some water reservoirs built around Paulding here to use for fire prevention?
Fire prevention and also the wells. We had a lot of problems with wells. And this was one reason why we could get they bought that land pretty reasonable. I think Sugar Factory owned that land at one time. And that runs clear back to where the railroad was, almost a quarter of a mile, I suppose, back there. And it had the capacity of that was supposed to be enough to last 5 years of raw water. And they sometimes only pump once a year to keep it filled up. So that was the reason for that. And then, of course, your fire protection, of course, you got to get your water up the high to feed your main, see, so that had to be pumped. And that's a 36-inch main, I think, from the water treatment plant up to the water tower. And then it goes into 12-inch and then 8-inch, 6 and so on. But, and they extended a lot of the lines out, 111 on County Hospital. And then out Emerald Road when Jim Nunn was conditioned out there in the Lakers. And they're still building. They're still extending lines.
I thought right around Paulding here, right around the city block here, there were reservoirs built into the...
Oh, you're talking about cisterns. Well, the first cistern that was built in Paulding was in the alley between, right across from the senior center on East Jackson Street, and it was made out of cypress lumber. And they got a crew out of Van Wert Fire Department to build the cistern for them. And that person's probably still down under there. Then later on, they appropriated money for I think about 10 or 12 brick cisterns. There's 2 left that I know of. One's right between Winkles and the Armory, going towards the courthouse. And the other one's over on the northwest corner in the street there. The last use that we had for that was on Sims Fire, and that's where the cheap supermarket used to be. And that was in March 1955. And the water tank, down on Caroline Street, they had it stripped down working on it. It was empty when this fire happened, but they were pumping from wells out on the Cook farm. And when the fire truck tied into the hydrant and hit that and stalled the pump out there, and you just went flat, had no water. So I was called from the post office to come over then I came over and then I told them to get them to open them cisterns up. And then we also relayed, we had all the departments in the county here on that. And had them relay it from one truck to the other till we got up with almost, well, we did say the parts of the VFW, but the Sims one. And this all started from, Junior Sim was working on a motor combine inside that Suter building, Suter somewhere in Briceton. And they had a light bulb, and it didn't have the guard on it. And when it fell, and then some gasoline was on the floor, whoop, she went. That was a bad day. It's right on Good Friday, I think that.
Can you imagine all the fires that were in each of the communities?
Yeah.
Without a fire truck, there would have to be
Oh.
like a brigade. They said, but just they would line
Yeah.
up with buckets and just pass them.
Yeah, and the cost too today. I mean, when we first got our, in 41, got our first new pumpers. George Reinhardt sold the chassis, and the American Fire Apparatus built them in Battle Creek, Michigan. One was for the rural, because it had a larger tank on it, and front mount pump, and the other was a midship pump that was kept in town that held 500 gallons. And that was before we had our tanker. Well, the cost of those two trucks was $11,855. Today, to get a pumper, you're talking $140,000 to $50,000. It's advanced that much. I know we bought three other while I was in there, and the highest one was $17,500. So inflation really took its toll there. But we had a lot of battles. We talked about Latty. We almost lost all the Latty with the TP Hall. That, but we had 55-mile-an-hour wind, and about 190 poles when they on fire. The creosote just burns you like fire too. But then somebody in the audience over there, this came back to me later, said they saw a rabbit or something on fire run underneath this KP building, we call it. And the way I got word of the fire was I was working in the post office, and the Latty postmistress came in, and she had all the stamp stock and the records and all, and she laid them on a counter. Dick Smith was our postmaster. Dick said, "Oh, what you bringing that over here for?" She said, "Well, it looks like we're going to lose our post office at Latty." He said, "You are?" He said, "Norm, you better get over there." I said, "Good night, go on." So I never got home until about 2 o'clock in the morning.
You know,
Fortunately, nobody was injured.
speaking of fires there at that building, I read where when Struthers Brothers had that store, and there was no banking system in Latty, and of course we had the elevator and numerous businesses, but everybody took their money to that store building, and Mr. Struthers banked it, and when he went bankrupt, everybody lost the money.
It wasn't covered by the government. So much for that.
Paulding used to have a band too, on the southwest corner of the square was their bandstand.
Bandstand was there, and on Thursday nights during the summer, they had, I could name a few of them, I think, Charlie Crow, Big Calvin, Shorty Sutton, and Howard Wonder, I think, played in that, and Harold Corwin,
My father.
and your father. Yeah.
That's when you put the gazebo.
I can still remember Shorty Sutton getting up and singing.
John Geyer was another.
Singing, "I'm looking over 40 over through a megaphone."
Yeah.
I can remember
That drew a lot of
Latty had,
people.
You know, Latty had band concerts. We had that thing that they went up in, and we had the medicine shows and square dancing out in the road. Old people was just all the square dancing.
Free movie.
Yeah.
And Latty was a boomer at one
You
time.
remember those Thursday nights, you know, the girls would start walking around the square, around the square. And the boys, if they had their Model Ts or so, they'd
Oh, sure.
around the square.
And the first courthouse, the first courthouse, it was over on the northeast corner of the square, wasn't it?
Out in there about where that monument is, the Eagles put out there.
Oh, no, it was the
Northeast?
northeast.
Oh, I
It was
think
a
it's on
two-story
north.
building.
Oh, I think
And the first
southeast. what I
first
think.
high school was on the
Other side,
southeast,
yeah, that's
southeast
right.
corner.
You're right. That's a wooden building.
Marie, what can you add now to the?
Kind of left you out there.
That's okay.
I get
Well, I
started,
think I
the
went
wife
over.
said you can't shut me
Oh,
off.
do you want to read it? That my grandfather Rothschild and his wife and 4 children came to Paulding in the 1850s in a 1-horse and with 1 wagon. And they came from Navarre, and it took them 3 days to get here. They had bought a 3-acre farm that was on the creek bank. It had a house and some sheds on it, unseen. There was no roads, there was just trails. And my dad was 9 years old at that time. And I don't think my grandfather ever had a job. They just cut wood and timber off the land, and that was it. Of course, when my dad took over, and so did my older uncle, and they supported the family in my granddad's old age. And Dad married when he was 30 in 1906, a neighbor girl who had come from the town of New Bavaria, probably 10 years, and they lived probably a mile from there. That was the Swery family. There was 3 boys that needed a job. And their house was too little in November. They had 7 children. So they traded the 40 acres in New Bavaria for 80 in Paulding. 40 of it was cleared, and it had a frame house and a frame barn, and 40 wasn't cleared, and that supplied a work for the whole family until they were able to be on their own. When my dad married at 30 years, he had bought 30 acres, which was within a mile of their house, and it had a log house on it. My older sister was born in that log house. Then a year later, they moved to a frame house, which was owned by the Wheeler brothers, and they were bankers, the one that went in there. He farmed that he cleared 40 acres. He farmed that for, I don't know how many years. So they moved to Paulding. There was a disagreement, and they moved to Paulding when I was 3 years old. And my sister was probably just a baby Catholic. And this house we removed is right out here, the 3rd house from the Lutheran church, just around the corner. I don't know what they're doing to it. They've been working on it for 2 years. The Longtimer girl owns it, but I don't know what her husband's name is. I gotta stop in and see what they're doing. Well, when I was 6, then my grandparents died, and my dad bought the home place, and we moved back out 5 miles in the country, back a lane. And we drove the horse and buggy. We did have a Catholic school. There was a Lambert school there, but Mother wanted us to come to the Catholic school. I was the only one in the family that never got to go to the country school or ride the school bus. So,
Right in the buggy.
yeah, we rode in the buggy until they paved 111, which was about 1925. And then we could drive the car. And I had, well, we knew the Catholic Church burned in 25. And then they built, it was probably 2 years later before they built the
1926.
26, 1 year later.
When they did it.
Well, I went to high school then till 33, and from there I went to Lorraine and lived with my sister. Put myself through business school. Came back and worked for Judge Mercantile for about a year. my uncle got me a job in Columbus. That's when the driver's license came into existence. And that's what we set up. They wanted 2 people from each county. And he suggested I go to Columbus and work. That would be a better job. We made $20 a week, but we had to pay $40 a month for just 2 little rooms. Well, I worked on there 5 years and went on then to Painesville. I had married my childhood sweetheart at that time, and he had a job in Painesville. So that's that.
But yeah, in all the meetings that we've had so far, every once in a while, I think in almost all the tapes, we will hear something about the beef factory, but we don't hear anything of substance about the beef factory. Can any of you tell us about that? That was here in Paulding County.
Well,
I
they-
found out when he was working at the beef factory, too.
I didn't get to work.
I have a history of it in the home,
Yeah,
but
you do.
it's not here.
Uh-huh.
I concentrated just on the
Yeah,
one.
all right.
My dad worked there, and he told me the history of the brown sugar. He said that, Nota, do you know how you get brown sugar? And I said, well, no, I don't. And he says, well, as we work there in the beef factory, we're all chewing tobacco, we spit.
Yeah. Of course, that's all.
You didn't see that?
It's all purified. Yes.
Oh, you
I think
did?
it-
That didn't sound the truth.
That's right. Milk,
Oh,
Especially the
embarrassing.
guys working on the battery.
Now that,
No.
Yeah, I was one of the people who worked at the
Got
factory.
that line in there for you.
you did?
Oh, yeah, several times.
My husband worked there when he was 17,
That employed a lot.
and that's the way that they boil the brown sugar down.
Yeah.
And then, but they want white, then they keep on boiling.
Uh-huh.
Purifying, I think, all
They call that clear dead oil.
We took up a collection from around the farmers to get the sugar plant to come in here. How much the town really paid, I don't know, to build it.
I would
It was first called the German.
first one was what?
Then when the war came, when they did,
American.
what, the German thing?
German American, wasn't it?
Uh-huh.
Then that Columbia Sugar Company, Paulding Sugar Company. So it had changed hands over the years.
Well, that was a big industry here in Paulding.
Oh, yeah.
Well, what about Alvin? Do you have anything to add to
No, not to the,
Edith?
I worked 2 years, I think, at the sugar beet factory. That's for the, and then it closed right after that. Otherwise, I would still be working a little bit longer.
There's a joke about that. My mother, he was a young man who came from down in Township, Washington Township. And, of course, we always called them, country people. Down there, we lived in the big city of Latty. And so, and he had to drive from there to the beef factory. So my mother said, well, now, Al, you're going to go, no, you can stay here. Then the talk of the town was that my mother was letting Alan and I live together.
Scandal.
But it wasn't that way.
It was just from like September to
That's the way rumors start.
New Year,
Laura, I have a question. They were talking about re-landscaping or Paulding, and they said on the street, on the sidewalks, that the basements extend out into the sidewalk halfway, from the stores into the sidewalk. I wonder why that was. So if to plant trees and things, they would have to fill up the ground under the sidewalks where the basements
Well,
extended.
I never ran into any of that because we had a lot of places where we had to put in coal in the basements, And sidewalk was always out clear over to where Bill's candy shop used to be. And we'd have to back clear up on the sidewalk, get the chute to go down
Maybe
there.
that's because
Yeah.
and they built it that way to put the pole chutes down in the basement.
Well, that could be
I
too.
wouldn't- But I know on the west,
I
on the
was
north
wondering that
side.
way, the way that some of these goose countries that we get, and I know the Barnes Hotel, that flooded all the time.
Well, the sports store, she said that she
Yeah.
had, her basement came out into the sidewalk. sidewalk, and I think along the north side there.
I think that was really common practice when they built these
Yeah.
town squares, because even in Defiance, it's the same way.
I heard that in Napoleon also, I wonder, but I don't know
And
why.
I do believe it was for the coal chutes, that would be a coal bin, where they would store their coal.
Convenient.
Well, there was a lot of these towns that were far-sighted enough, especially Bryant, how wide they made their downtown area there. So they could hold their jubilee and still maintain traffic. And here, like, we have to shut it off, and some merchants get a little unhappy when they went by their gas station and close it off.
And was there a theater across from the old theater, from the new
Yeah,
theater?
talking
Wasn't
about
there?
theaters, we had 3 theaters at one
I
time.
thought there was.
We had one called the Amuse You, and of course the Grand Theater, and then there was one about where the Red Owl is.
That's the one I was referring to, someone told me I was
I
wrong.
found the name of that and I wrote it down, I forgot where it was. But,
They had the Holy Roller Church in there, didn't they?
no,
After
the
they
bowling
closed.
alley and everything.
Well, while we're still on Paulding for just 1 minute before Dorothy starts here, I want to mention something, because if any of you are out in the public and you see what I'm going to ask about, tell me, it belongs back here at the library. At one time, we had hanging down in this room a picture that was, about 3 feet long and about 2 feet high. It was all wood. And it's, some artist way back drew the downtown area of Paulding, which included the courthouse. I remember that being on it. We also had a very small picture of John Paulding. It was a picture of a bust of him. Both of those 2 things have disappeared, and we know they've been taken. Someone took them from our
And is that why you
library
were here, Chief?
just within the last couple of years. We were going to donate those 2 items to the Historic Museum, and especially, they wanted a picture of John Paulding. I said, we've got one at the library. We went to find it, couldn't find it. And neither can we find, and it was always in this room, long picture. It's a wooden picture, has a gold frame around it. The back of it, the whole thing is wood, but it was drawings on wood. So if you see one of those around Paulding County, let us know. Yeah, it shows the first streets here in the first street in Paulding was the first business place, and it included a very small little courthouse. All right, Dorothy, you'll have your stuff.
over here.
All right.
And then,
Dorothy Chester, of course, is known as our historian of Paulding County. So she'll be able to do some extensive study about Paulding and Paulding County, and she'll be able to tell us quite a bit.
I'll sit here so that if she can get these pictures, why, Ohio, the first state to be carved out of the Great Northwest Territory, was admitted into the Union in 1802. The northwestern section was the last part of Ohio to be organized and settled. By an act of the Ohio State Legislature of February the 12th, 1820, proceedings were made to divide this newly acquired territory into counties, the Indians having ceded their land to the whites. Williams County was organized February the 2nd, 1824. Paulding County, also Defiance County, were attached to Williams. In 1839, Paulding County was organized. Defiance, Ohio was the county seat of Williams County in our early history. Township lines were established, but the townships were not organized until a later date. In fact, 3 of Paulding County townships were organized before the county itself. Crane in 1825, Carroll in 1829, and Brown Township in 1830. Jackson Township, Paulding County, was organized in 1851. Prior to that, it was attached to Brown Township. Principal timber of the territory was oak, ash, sycamore, cottonwood, elm, maple, and beech, a small amount of poplar, and a black walnut. The largest piece of stick timber ever gotten out of Paulding County was in the winter of 1865, Civil War days, by Johnson and Snook. It was cut in Jackson Township, 2 miles west of Melrose, Ohio, at which place it was banked to be hauled by canal. They had to drag that with horses to the canal. Block of tackle being used to handle it. The dimensions of this timber was 3 foot square by 75 foot in length, thus producing 675 cubic feet of timber. Progress and development at this time was very slow. In 1820, Ohio became a state. I've got that in there twice. I'll go on with that. It became a state. Paulding County was organized in 1839, Jackson Township 1855. 30 years later, 1881, villages were organized. Broughton and Hedges were the only villages to be established in Jackson Township. Factors contributing to territory development were timber, soil composition, money, power or prestige, and transportation. 2 unsuccessful attempts were made to build a railroad, the first in 1854 and again in 1872. A third try became a success, the Nickel Plate Railroad being completed in 1881. The wealthy Vanderbilts of New York and Washington, D.C. controlled the Lakeshore Railroad, a competitive line to the new railroad line struggling to be built. The Vanderbilts strongly fought to prevent the birth of the Nickel Plate Railroad. Possessing both money and power, they were temporarily able to stop the growth of the nickel plate. Mr. Calvin T. Weiss, a young railroad man from Lima, Ohio, personally interested in securing a means of shipping freight east, was determined that an east-west rail line should be built. This he was successful in doing by building the nickel plate. William H. Vanderbilt realized he had lost. He come to Paulding in 1881, the year the nickel plate railroad was completed, purchased land north of the railroad in section 31, Jackson Township, from the government, and proceeded to lay out the village of Broughton. He built the Vanderbilt Stave and Lumber Company first. First called the Washington Stave and Lumber Company. The Vanderbilts remained in control 7 years, at which time, 1888, the factory was sold to the Edwin Bell and Sons company. Along with the stave mill, Vanderbilt built a 2-story mercantile building, that store building. First one on the top. That's it, yeah. Okay. All right. If she can get that. 2-story mercantile. During dealing in staples and goods necessary to the employees of the stave mill. This was often referred to as a company store. They sold shoes, boots, overalls, mackinaw coats, yard goods, coal oil, groceries, harness, horse blankets, and so forth. The list goes on and on. Employees of the mill would establish credit from their wages, would pay their bills, and immediately begin a new charge account for their next payday. The stave company also owned a row of mill houses west of the stave mill, grounds where the employers rented housing. In fact, most of the earlier residents had their lives embedded to the stave mill, to the stave company. The village of Broughton was unincorporated at this time, 1888. But by 1890, the community had chosen a mayor, a marshal, and treasurer. Meeting places were provided by whomever would host the meeting. To learn more of this, to refer on something else I had in previous one. They organized a council consisting of John Steinbar, Isaac Lambert, Orland Brown, William Rainey, and Axel White. Mayor Benjamin DeBon, Marshal James Grubb, and treasurer John Cooley. These men, on July the 24th, 1890, awarded Henry Ludwig a contract to construct a prison at a cost of $190. This Henry Ludwig was a brother to Otto, an older brother. By November 1890, a petition for incorporation was drawn, and Holland and Lamb attorneys were hired at a cost of $50 to draft an ordinance of incorporation. On April 9, 1881, a meeting was held in Storrs Pool Hall, that was my grandfather, and on this day was elected for the incorporated village. Now these other people, that wasn't incorporated, I spoke of before. The incorporated village mayor was R.G. Bigley, clerk James Rogers, marshal James Grennan, treasurer John Cooley, councilman James Grubb, William Rainey, and Milton Thomas, each for a 2-year term. This information I took out of the village court records. Now that large general store, if she can get that one, did you have your hand?
Right here.
The first store manager was Mr. M.E. Heller. If you look closely at the picture, you will notice a sign on the porch which reads V.S. and Lumber Company, which means Vanderbilt Stave and Lumber. The building is still in use. It stands north of the railroad tracks and on the west side of Main Street, now known as County Road 123. The railroad depot, you have that there, the railroad depot was also on the west side of County Road 123, what was directly south across the tracks from the store. A board walk upon which freight was hauled from the depot to the back door of the store can be seen if you look for the man standing on the railroad tracks. The IOOF Hall, Independent Order of Hospital Hall, is upstairs. A wooden stairway leads up to the Dodge Hall. Another wooden stairway was on the north side of the building, running practically the whole length of the building. To the west, or back of the store, is a smaller building having a ventilator. Does that show? A ventilator on the top. This was a potato storage building. In the fall of the year, a whole railroad car of potatoes would be placed in this building until, with the arrival of spring, the potatoes that had not been sold would have to be sprouted in hopes of being able to dispose of them. 2 tall stacks seen in the picture were atop of a large barrel mill. The walk from the store to the barrel mill, you crossed a small wooden footbridge which was over the Demond Ditch that runs through the town. This bridge was almost a direct line to the mill. The mill yards extended from the railroad north, which is now 613, and west to an old mud street now known as Front Street. And of course, today the street, of course, is no longer mud. Each mill was required a big log yard and a bolt yard space to pile an adequate supply for the mills during wet weather. They had bad roads. Also, space was needed for drying hoops, barrel stave, barrel heading, keg staves, and hog keg headings. In addition, what the picture shows were 2 barns, one for horses and one for oxen, which was feed rooms for hay and grain. Unseen in the picture, but of great importance, was a 2.5-mile steam railway to haul in lumber and logs from the north. A switch for the nickel plate railroad spur can be seen behind the man standing on the tracks. This spur passed the cattle hogs and sheep loading dock, crossed the Demond Ditch, and extended the full length of the mill. There was also a dry stock loading shed. Hay and straw were loaded there. George McCullough, for a number of years, bought hay and straw, and at one time he got to ship to Canada, and he wondered how in the world is he going to, you have to get a permit to go into a foreign country, and there's so much, but he made it. And then he also bought, a lot of timothy was raised around Jackson Township at that time, and it was shipped to the bluegrass country of Kentucky for their horses. Just beyond the railroad switch is a small building that looks similar to an old-style corn crib. This is a part of the cattle loading ramp. It consists of two ramps, one of the lower and one of the upper deck. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, many cattle and hogs and sheep were shipped from Broughton, Ohio. Ryan and Vogel were sub-buyers at that time. After the coming of the sugar factory in Paulding, the Council of Broughton granted to Axel White and to H. Stores and Son, that'd be my grandfather and my father, the right to put in wagon scales so that beets could be weighed and shipped by rail to their respective sugar factories. Mr. White's beets were shipped to Ottawa, Ohio, and the store's weigh scales shipped to Paulding factory. The Ottawa factory was known as the Columbus Sugar Company, and the one at Paulding was called the German-American Company. Both of these whale scale operators began in April 1905. Again, referring to the store picture on the right, can be seen the early town jail. Later, a jail, somewhat similar in appearance, was built east and a little north of the present town hall and the township house. Also, Andrew Cotterman, there's a blacksmith. Also, Andrew Cotterman, at a later date, owned and operated a blacksmith shop between the large store and the Demond Ditch. The Cotterman family moved to Lorain, Ohio during World War I to work in factory for war materials. Fines, mostly from drunks, financed the construction of a board sidewalk that ran from the railroad north on the east side of Main Street to what is now State Route 613, then east along the south side of the road to the brick school located where Polart's junkyard now stands. This boardwalk was 4 foot wide. The boards deteriorated in a few years and were replaced by a gravel and cinder walk made 6 inches thick with cinders. On January the 25th, 1900, the last of the old factory was dismantled, loaded on railroad cars to be taken to Rome, Indiana, ending the hoop and stave works at Broughton, Ohio. The grocery store as a company store ceased to exist 2 years prior when W.S. Shook purchased and privately owned and managed and operated. I've got who owned that. You don't want all that, do you? Sometime during Robert Johnson's ownership of the store, he brought in an alfalfa mill and located it behind the store in one of the barns that was still standing. Alfalfa mills were also established at the same time in Latty, Worstville, and Payne. Alfalfa was ground into meal in these mills, the meal being mixed into ground poultry and livestock feed. Alfalfa dust flew all around in the air, and I bet you folks remember that, for miles around. Therefore, they were quite unpopular, and they didn't last very long. There's a picture of, I'm not prepared, there's a picture of the store and schoolies. This is one thing, there was robberies back in the 1930s. There were a lot of robberies, you know, times were getting hard. And the schoolie store in Broughton was robbed a couple of times, but Shook's store, I just want to read you, this was by the Dillinger gang, and they were, they got away, of course, and then they went down around Clyde and did some robbing, and then to Bowling Green, and finally, he was walking with a woman dressed in red in Chicago and was shot, if you remember. Along about 8 o'clock, this is December 1933, along about 8 o'clock on Wednesday evening of last week, 2 strangers entered the store of Ben Shook at Broughton. One of them asked for a certain brand of tobacco. Upon being informed that he had none of that brand, they asked Mr. Shook to hold up his hands and hand over what money he had. George Gray and Homer Good, customers in the store, were also asked to join in the hand-up game. All three did as they were told. One of the strangers held 2 guns and the other one. One of the men kept close watch on 3 men as the 3 men upheld the store. They went through the pockets of Mr. Shupp and his customers. They also went through the safe. They received a total of $35 in cash. Nothing else was molested. Mrs. Shupp came into the store and was also searched. She carried no money. When the strangers came in, Mr. Good had his hands in his pocket. This would be Fairgood's father. As he drew his hands out, he brought inside of his pocketbook, and he let it slip down in the side of his pants, and luckily it stopped at his knees. In that manner, he saved the $15 that he carried. The 3 were told to remain in the side of the store for 10 minutes. The robbers also tore the telephone from the wall. As soon as the telephone was repaired, the county officers were notified, and the sheriff and deputy were soon there. Tracks indicated the robbers had got into a parked car near the railroad, drove south to the township line and west to 127 and then south. But the robbery was, at that time, the different stores. A Church of Christ, and I know you won't want all of this at Broughton, but I do. Yes, I believe I will. The Church of Christ of Broughton, Ohio, was formerly called the Disciple Church. Parishioners worshipped up until 1906 at a church at Hedges, Ohio. This church building was torn down and a new structure was built between the 2 towns of Broughton and Hedges. It was located on the south side of what is now known as 613, located between the old brick 2-story school and Keck's Grocery. However, Keck's Grocery was not there at this time. This was all a beautiful grove of trees, and the Methodist Church used to have an annual picnic in there. The same heavy bell was used in the new church. 5 men with rope and pulley tried to raise the bell to the belfry. They were successful in raising it only 4 or 5 feet. Sorepty Pierce, who was janitor of the school at the time, asked if she could help. It went zooming up without any more trouble. These men had tried the hard way. They could have used a horse. This Sorepty Pierce, she and a cousin wove carpet, and they did washings in Broughton. And of course, she was janitor of the church. Later on, Dr. Mauser saw that she went to Chicago and had surgery. She became a man, and her name was changed to Melton Pierce, and she married and became a minister. She had been a midwife for my grandmother and a lot of those women. And of course, when she came back, she asked for permission to go out to talk to my grandfather and the others. A lot of people around Broughton remember that, and that's why I'm telling about this church. This is a picture of the Methodist Church.
Is that the one still standing?
It's still standing there, but it's been remodeled. I've got all of that history. This is a Lutheran church. I've got the history of that, but I won't go into all that.
How many churches in Broughton have? How many churches?
Pardon?
How many churches in Broughton?
Broughton had the Disciple Church, the Methodist Church, the Lutheran Church, United Brethren, and then the Seventh-day Adventists met in the homes. They called it Sabbath school, but they met when I was a child. This, I don't think you get this. This is Schooley's brick store, and it's set on the other side of the track. Now, my father, my dad had bought Dr. Houston's used car. He had one of those old cars that you cranked on the side, no top, and something similar to this. So he was able to drive a car, and Mr. Schooley wanted to buy a car at Auburn, Indiana. So he asked my dad to go with him, and they got on the train at Broughton, and they went west. I don't know where they transferred, but they transferred somewhere up there and went back to Auburn and bought the car. It took 3 days to get from Broughton to Auburn, Indiana, to buy the car and back to Broughton. And if you notice the car, the automobile, the driver is on the other side of this. He's on the right-hand side instead of on the left-hand side as we are now. And this is a picture of Hosbury's store. I'd like to get on that because I clerked in that when I was just a kid. In late 1913, George Hosbury began construction of a new frame building on the east side of Main Street and on the immediate south bank of the Demond Ditch. The purpose of the structure was to be a pool hall and lunchroom combined. By January the 1914, 1 year later, Mayor W.S. Shilp instructed the marshal to inform George Hosbury that the mayor and council of Broughton Village would like to have him lower the blinds in his pool room and close his place of business at 11:30 p.m. Monday through Saturday nights. The large amount of friction over the pool room induced Mr. Hosbury to convert the business into a fine grocery store, this becoming a competitor to the other two stores, Schooley's and Shup's. Hosbury did not carry shoes, boots, and yard goods and so forth as did the other two, but carried a larger stock of grocery items, a large showcase of notions such as laces, elastic, comb, shoestrings, and so forth. On the back storeroom was they handled kerosene. There was no electricity at that time. Had a large ice box that held cold meats, cheese, butter, lard, and also a supply of pop, which was supplied on a weekly basis from Hurdle Bottling Company in Paulding. As a young teenage girl, I, Dorothy Storrs, clerked in this store for $3 per week. The hours were 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. with privileges of anything I wanted to eat for lunch free. There was cold meats, cheese, buns, bulk candy, crackers, bananas, oranges, apples, cookies, and pop. I lived 1.25 miles south of the corner from 613 and Road 127. I walked each morning and evening to work for $3. Well, it would only be, I got $3 a week and I worked 12-hour day, 5 days, 60 hours would run 50 cents an hour, wouldn't it? Besides clerking, my other duties were to sweep the floor, dust and keep the counters, and show cases clean and spotless. A large bench sat up along the wall of the store behind a huge coal-burning stove used for winter heating. I worked during summer and school vacation, so never had to carry out the ashes. This bench was a meeting place for people of the community. People as far as 1.5 miles away often walked to the store to shop, and this bench made a very convenient place to rest and catch up on local happenings. Few daily papers at this time. There were only 2 county papers, the Paulding County Democrat and the Paulding County Republican, that were delivered by mail weekly. Quite a few of the Broughton local men worked for the Nickel Plate Railroad. Their purchases were made on credit, and cash on payday would come just the same as a company store. On January the 10th, 1917, Mr. Hosbury became postmaster at Broughton. At that time, the government didn't own the post offices. You bid to get to be postmaster, and then you furnished your own place for that. And Mrs. William Baker became his assistant. It was established in the front part of the general store. A few years prior to Mr. Hosbury's death in 1937, he was robbed late one evening returning home after closing the store. He lived only about 2 blocks, one east and then north of the block. It was cold weather. His cries for help could not be heard. He received a fractured skull and had to have a plate placed in his head. Approximately in 1939, James Andrew Ross of Fort Wayne bought the store. And they operated this business for a number of years, and then finally, Georgia Gray bought the building, and the only thing that's left of it is just a green back of it anymore. Broughton had this is what Broughton is like now, but there's a picture of it before the fire. In 1906, Broughton had two elevators, one on the north and one on the south side of the street, and a hardware that my parents run the hardware, and there was a saloon, a drugstore, and a restaurant. Those all got all burnt out in one fire. And this is the street as it looks now. The town hall, that's where this used to be. Broughton had a big band too. That's a picture of their band. And I've got a history of the band and what they played for the instruments. And they had a smallpox epidemic. I've got too much to. There's a picture of the mills. I thought I had something here. I wanted to get. There's a few things in the that I borrowed the clerk's record way back from the time before it was ever incorporated. They let me take it home, and I went clear through the whole record and took out things that I thought might be of interest to future generations, the future people. On a few things that I kind of just in 1893, they passed an ordinance for cattle running loose in the streets. And in 1893, they bought a steel scraper for the corporation that was used in grading and repair of the streets. And they paid $200 for this. They paid $100 at the time of purchase, and then a note for $100 balance was given by the corporation to run for 12 months without any interest on the thing. I have a record of the town, but just a couple things. Oh, the fire protection in in 1895, this is what it consisted of. They had 36 fire buckets were purchased for fire safety of E. Bill and Sons for $18.56. Ladders were purchased of Axel White for $6.82. Now that was all the fire, all they had. You had a fire while you had a bunch of ladders and buckets to go carry water, and there weren't too many wells. Somebody had to stand there and pump that to fill it up before you could get there, so it's no wonder that your buildings burnt. The pump for the town, Wesley Shook furnished the pump for the town well, and he was allowed a bill for $14. That was what it cost for the. But there's one thing. The Lutheran Church, after they didn't use that anymore, they used it for a dance hall, and of course people objected to that. Then it became Latty was starting to get an athletic club, and it was then used for the gymnasium or the pep park. Just one thing I want to find, I don't want to just. Oh, the telephone, in 1899 is when the first telephone service was brought. Broughton. Now, 1907, is when they started to really stone the streets, and they approved the following bills for unloading stone per street. Henry Hoover, 11 hours at 30 cents an hour. Arthur Rogers, 12 hours at 15 cents an hour. Arthur Girton, 5 hours at 30 cents an hour. So you see that they didn't get any wages back in 1899, and they built the first mile from what is now 613, 1 mile. That's when the first stone road came in. The rest up to that time, nothing but mud. Really